Hello and welcome to the Kenny Hack. For this tutorial, I'm going to be going over the process I used to prepare the canvas and how I adjusted the image in Lightburn to get these results. Here are the paints I used. The first coat was with the little tube on the left. It's a white poster board paint that you can be purchased at any hobby store. This first layer of poster board paint was applied with a brush, just painted on in a really heavy, thick layer. Once this layer was dried out, I sanded it off with 600 grit sandpaper with an orbital sander. This was all just to smooth out the surface of the canvas and reduce the amount of the small pores in between all the canvas thread. The next layer was satin white 2X Rust-Oleum. This layer was also put on very heavily, power dried with a blow dryer using a combination of hot air and cold air. I have found you don't want to get the paint too hot where it can actually remelt it and it'll cause your colors to bleed together. The next layer was Rust-Oleum Sunburst Yellow. For this image, I actually wasn't trying to burn all the way down to the white layer. I kind of wanted it to stop in the yellow. So I applied this layer with two coats, one going horizontal and one coat going vertical, just to try to get an even layer. The next coat was Rust-Oleum Sunrise Red. This layer was put on with a single pass with as thin but even coat as I could get. The last layer was Rust-Oleum 2X Flat Black. And like the red layer, this was put on in a single pass as thin as I could get. Something else I found is that you want to put something underneath the canvas to help prop it up so it stays flat. For this large canvas, these two smaller canvases seemed to nest in there just fine, and it'd be at a decent level where it wasn't lifting the canvas up too much. Now, a lot of people like to run test patterns of the little blocks at different power levels to see what different colors their burns are going to create. I actually like to make a full test canvas and make passes over the most critical area where I can play with the settings to really get numbers dialed in. And this is where using Lightburn to do all your photo editing can really pay off. It's very easy to, once it's imported into Lightburn, to where you can make all your adjustments to your brightness, contrast, enhancements, and keep burning multiple test runs until you can see how each change affects the image. And just to show that not everything goes right, even when you think you've done everything as well as you can, this was my second little test canvas. In the middle of this canvas was really stretchy. It was kind of sagged down, and it was sagged down so far that it became out of focus when the laser came across it, so it ended up not burning very deep. It stayed really black. I'm sorry for the glare. I couldn't see the camera. It was getting such a glare for that image. And that's what gave me the idea of putting the two smaller canvases nested underneath the large canvas to help the canvas just stay as flat as can be. That's where doing tiles is easier than canvas, as tiles have such a nice flat surface. It's easy to dial your numbers in on. Where canvas, it has a little more fluctuation in its surface, so you can be trying to hit one specific color, but if that area canvas is flexed out of shape a little bit, the laser might not be focused well enough to cut to the layer you want. So that's where I got the idea of propping it up and trying to get a flat a surface as I can. So here's going to be a time lapse of the burn, everybody's little favorite seizure-inducing film. Ran at high speed, just kind of seeing how it goes. There's a couple times where my new gimbal tripod kind of always seems to power down and lose its balance and does some weird things once in a while. I'm still trying to figure it out. So there's some spots where it gets clipped out, and you'll see some time-lapse jumps in the time, and the image will slightly shift. That was for me trying to get the tripod wobbles out of the video. So here we go. When I first started this project, I wasn't really planning on putting anything around the image. I was just going to leave that black border. I thought that it looked really nice on some of the other test pieces I had done. It really makes the photo stand out. Kind of seems to give it the look that the image is set into the canvas below that border. But about halfway through, I kind of decided it looked nice if I could put like some elven writing or some kind of Lord of the Rings text looking stuff around it to kind of fill out the image. So that's when I got digging around on the internet and found Gandalf's little speech here before his battle with Balrog, and I engraved that speech around there to make the border. Once the image is done, you'll see it'll start carving in all the lettering of the text. And those, each side, and like the left, top, and right and bottom are all set as a different cut file. So it'd do them in order, and this kind of helps reduce the time it took to run the image. There it is, all finished. After this, all I needed to do is wipe it down with a very soft microfiber cloth to kind of remove any of the fine soot left behind. From there, let's jump over into how I edited the image before the burn and kind of give you all the settings I used. So finally trying out a new screen capture program. Hopefully it makes it easier to follow instead of just trying to film the screen from a tripod. This image was pretty well set up the way I downloaded it. It was already at 300 dpi and already a 9" by 12" image, so I didn't really need to change much. I flipped it over to a grayscale just so I could kind of see how dark it was if I wanted to modify any of the image in GIMP before I sent it to Lightburn. But it was looking pretty well. So basically, seeing here, it was already 300 dpi, set it to 9:12, hit scale. And I went to File, Export, and I saved it as a PNG file. And I'll show you over here in Lightburn why I'm going to start using PNG format. Makes it a little bigger file, but it actually makes the image come out clearer when you edit in Lightburn. And I'll show you a side-by-side in Lightburn. It might be hard to see on the screen, but there is a noticeable difference with the same settings, a JPEG versus a PNG file. Now we're in Lightburn. Here is the setup of that project. You can see all the text around the outside are set as different cut layers. And set at different scan angles just to reduce the amount of time it takes for the laser. They're just reducing the negative space that it doesn't need to burn anything. So here I'm dragging in that exact same image as a JPEG and going to show a comparison with the exact same settings. Wish there was a way to zoom in on this screen capture so it'd be a little easier to tell. But like a JPEG image always gets a little distortion added to the image. When it compresses the file, it loses a little bit of the sharpness. So it seemed like when you save it as a PNG, a bitmap might be the exact same way. It doesn't compress it as much as a JPEG and lose some of them sharper edges. Like the PNG, when I maxed out the enhancement, little bit of black that was still in there, that was full black, seemed to pop out a little bit more. So that's why I'm going to start save my files as a bitmap or a PNG. I think when you enhance them in Lightburn, it helps some of the contrast pop a little bit better and give a little sharper edge to it. There you can see my shape property settings. It's 1.05 on the gamma, -35 on the contrast, 15 on the brightness, 100 on the first enhancement, 200 on the second enhancement, and 0 on the last. That's kind of where I found seemed to make the finer details pop the best in the for this image. And that's something we have to play with as you go do more and more photos. You'll hopefully be able to find some setting or figure out how to adjust your settings to get the finer details to come through. You'll see around the outside of this piece there's also a box drawn in, and that's a 11 by 14 box, and that represents the outside edge of my canvas. I use that box to make sure my canvas is centered properly under the laser. I can trace that image using the shift trace or frame button, and once I got my canvas centered into that square, I know all my image is going to lay out how it's going to lay out in relationship to that box. Now let's take a look at the image settings. I ran at 7,000 millimeters per minute. I was at 62% power. I maybe could have went up to about 65. I could have cut a little deeper into the yellow and got a little more yellow to come through, but I was still pretty happy with where this 62 came out. And I was 15 on the minimum power. Working with grayscale is a lot different than using the dithers. Dithers, it's burning the same power of dot all the time, and it's just how many of them dots it's stacking in together. So the lasers, if you set it to 65, it's running at 65% power and just firing on and off. Grayscale, the laser's running all the time and just adjusting its power level. So this, like, even when it's on an all black area, since this is an inverted image, it sees black as 0, but I set it to a 15%, so in actuality, even when it thinks it's not burning black and it shouldn't be burning anything, the laser is running at 15% power. And this is something you'll have to play with to really learn how to understand how grayscale works. The max power is pretty easy to understand. The higher the max power, the deeper it's going to burn in through your layers. So like I said, if I'd upped the high end power a couple more percent, I'd have got more yellow into the image. It's the low power setting that can really affect the outcome. When I ran test patterns with the minimum power set at 0%, I wasn't getting very much detail into the blacker side of the image. The laser just wasn't strong enough to have any details difference between the low settings. So as I raised up that minimum power, that started off my new 0 point, and I just kept working it up until I started getting more and more detail on the blacker side of the image. Well, that pretty much does it for all my settings. I'll clip in a photo zoomed in on this work so you can kind of see how the finer details turned out. I really like how the text turned out on this. It was all cut at the same power level, so I thought it'd all be kind of one solid color. I ran it at 60%, just slightly under the max power I had. The very top text turned out exactly how I hoped, where it kind of had a little bit of yellow, red, orange. It kind of had that flame effect. Some places it did it very well, and I think mostly just because on the edges the paint maybe gets a little thicker than it does in the middle, and so it kind of come out with a slightly different effect than what a solid color should be. But kind of a lucky mistake, I guess, how it turned out. Now, I haven't put any clear coat on this project yet. If I do, this is the stuff I'm going to use. I'd like to thank a friend of mine in the forums, Joe, for putting me onto this stuff. So far it works very well on the wood and the canvas pieces I have tried it on. It doesn't seem to cause your wood to change color. It doesn't seem to make the paint wrinkle or melt. You know, it seems to work very well. So if I decide to go with that, that's what I'm going to be using. But I really kind of like how this has a flat look to it. It doesn't have any glossy shine. So it might just get left as is. Well, I hope this has been helpful. Please like, subscribe, share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all on the next video.